Yeah, so hi, my name is Keith Rozario. Yeah, like you say, in 2017, I started off SayaKenaHack.com. Short-lived website, less than a week old before it was shut down. But it was a breach notification website that was later blocked by various agencies within the Malaysian government. And here I am today. Yeah.
Okay. So since that time, 2017, what has
Hmm.
happened to your breach notification efforts? And did you follow the Great Telco League story and I don't know, like a kind of like a sense of dissatisfaction or whatever sense that was brought about by your short-lived your website having to close down so prematurely,
So
and
prematurely, yeah.
yeah, and it was kind of an injustice because you were doing a service. I think personally, I think it was a service for the Malaysian public, and a lot of people were actually interested to know whether they were actually hacked or not. You were doing a
Yep.
great thing, a good thing, right? Um, but it was not meant to be. And so what went on from there? What happened?
Um, Yeah, I mean, it's all water under the bridge right now. Trying like to dwell in the past, but yeah. So I mean, the website was launched, I think, I forget now. I think a Monday or a Tuesday. It was blocked by Thursday afternoon. Something along those time frames. I forgot the
Okay.
actual dates, but yeah, and I shut it down in about, I think it was it Saturday. So it's roughly 5 6 days end to end from start to finish.
Mm.
Within that time, a couple 100,000 people came to the site to check whether they were breached or not. Part of the breach, most likely, if you had an account in any telco registered under your name, you were in the breach. Just a matter of which numbers were in that breach at the time.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, injustice is a big word, I think, but I mean, subsequent to that, I did sort of follow up, and we did have a couple of conversations with the PDPA commissioners. So both of them, there were two commissioners at the time.
Mm.
Um, and it's just the way I think government agencies work. There are certain regulations and sort of laws that they have to abide by.
Mm.
Strictly speaking, within the framework that they're given, I think a breach notification website is not possible legally speaking, so they couldn't be seen to support it. What really happened is the PDPA requested the MCMC to block the site, and the MCMC on that request instructed the telcos to block it. And if you want to get a little bit more technical, it's a minor DNS block, so that's pretty easy to circumvent. But
Mm.
obviously, on Saturday when I shut down the website, no one would have been able to access the website with or without any circumvention.
Mm.
So that's roughly where we left it. In that time since then, so it's about 3.5 years now. Well, it's actually 3 years now. There have been a couple of other breaches. So there's a couple. I think the big one that I remember is the Malindo one. So there was a Malindo breach that I did check in and that I am a part of as well, and a
Mm.
couple of others. So breaches are going to happen. It's just a fact of our modern life,
Okay.
and they're going to happen more, I think, over the next couple of years.
Okay, so we'll get back to the Malindo Bridge since you brought it
Yeah,
up. We'll get back to that later. But I guess the purpose of this podcast show, or rather the
yeah,
objective that we're trying to get to, is that the Macau scam happened, right?
yeah,
And there was like millions and millions of ringgit involved,
yeah.
and uh, it's popularly believed. Is alleged that a Macau scam happened because of the Great Telco Leak data that was leaked because of the Great Telco Leak in 2017. Actually made the Macau scam possible. If in your opinion, I do not know, maybe you played it back in your mind, but if in your opinion your website SayaKenaHack.com had been allowed to remain up, what do you think would have happened?
In
Could it
regards
have
to the Macau scam,
Yeah, could it have like maybe, I don't know, prevented the Macau scam, or maybe the Macau scam would have still carried on but to a lesser scale?
nah, wouldn't
No,
have impacted it. Not one bit. No,
not one
I
bit.
mean, not one bit. No. um, the Macau scam is actually a pretty smart thing, right? If you think of it like a bad guy, right? So
Yes.
it sort of it plays on regular human emotions. It plays on like the fear part. So you get a call from someone
Mm.
and you're in an emergency situation. Either it's some guy pretending to be an inspector so and so from some police station or something like that, and so they like basically scare you into staying on the phone and transferring money out in the process. And depending on who you ask, they basically can walk you through even setting up your e-banking account, doing all of that while you're still on the phone, right? So you got no time to call anyone or tell anyone, and that sort of work. It sort of preys on people who probably would never have come to SayaKenaHack.com, and even if they did, I don't think that it would have made any difference, because you under those sort of circumstances, they sort of create this artificial duress. You're not going to be thinking very clearly, and so whether or not SayaKenaHack exists or not, I don't think the Macau scam would have had any impact to their bottom line. It just wouldn't make any difference.
Okay.
Whether the data came from the same. So you have to remember that the breach wasn't in 2017. The data in the breach actually traces back, I think, 2014. I can't remember the actual date. So it's
yes.
in 2020, it's about 6-7 years old now.
Yes.
But it's still relevant. People, because of I forgot what you call it. You can now take your phone number across, right? So you can, as you change telcos, you can bring your same phone number across. So as long as I got your phone number, those things remain, pretty stagnant. You don't change your phone number very often these days.
Yes.
Particularly if you're a postpaid subscriber. And your IC number is permanent. It's chopped.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that these scammers use it. But if you were going to look out for this, every once in a while I get some random email from some random guy asking me to sell him the data, or asking me to whether they can find their long lost uncle or their long lost brother. They sort of give me the name. I don't accede to any of these requests, because it'll be improper use of the data. But it's not that hard to find the data. It's not that hard to process the data. It's not that hard to load that data into a database. And it's not that hard to figure out who are the most vulnerable, i.e., select star where your IC number is, starts with 47 or 57 or some, because you can tell your age or the age of the person from the IC number. It's a very strict correlation. And so if you want to target older, elderly people who, going to have more money. So when I was 20 something, I had no money. So you don't target young people, target old people. It's very easy from this breach to get basically all the data you need. You got a phone number, you got an address, you got a name, and you got an IC number, roughly enough to pull off anything, right?
And the IMEI and the IMSI.
Yeah.
Prof, you look as though you have something to add.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Okay. It's interesting that you brought up that the entire Macau scam was based on people's fear. Generally, I think there are a few aspects that we can look at here. First is collection of personal information, unauthorized secondary use of information, and then improper access. So in situations like this, we always have, there is a balance between what the responsibilities of those entities that collect and use our data, and also the part of the users themselves. Yep. Yes, there is a lot that, when I read, whenever there is an incident of a breach, then what we read on the media is that we are warned that we have to be aware of this, we have to be careful and stuff like that. But yet, to a certain extent, we surrender the control of our information to these entities. And in that sense, there's nothing that we could do. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this? Another thing that you brought up just now was that the elderly people. In some cases, if you look at the generations of mobile phones that we have now, our elderly people, how much do they know how to use it? In most cases, they actually pass it to their friend or someone else to help them set up the mobile phone, or they can learn perhaps a little bit, but which doesn't give them control over what they can and what they cannot do.
Yep.
So what would be your thoughts on this?
So start with the first one first. Yeah, I mean, it's part of living in the modern world. They have to give people your data so that they can do things. And if you want to register for a telco, you have to tell them where to send the bill to. You have to tell them your name, and you have to give your IC number. You walk up to any private condominium, any gated guarded community, you have to identify yourself. And the way you identify yourself is you present your identification card. It's your IC card, right? It's you say, well, I am who I am. Here's the government issued ID, and that's a number there, and then some guard somewhere might write it down in some book that never gets cleansed at any point. But basically part and parcel of living in the modern world requires your data to be somewhere. And yeah, you lose some of this control. So you give data to telco and the telco lost it. Nothing you can do about it, right? The only option you have is basically not get on a telco, which is pretty unreasonable, right? There's just no way. you have to have some sort of telco account to sort of operate in the modern world. So I mean, that's one part of it, right? So
absolutely,
your data is there, and it's going to get lost, and it's going to get stolen, and that's just the price you pay. The thing you want to make sure is that as a result of that lost data, that you don't get scammed, or you don't get identity theft, or you don't, that sort of thing, and that you protect yourselves from those things rather than trying to protect the data. And because once this data is there, there's no really going back on it. Your IC number is a permanent thing. So once your IC number and your name or something that's published online, there's just no way to pull it back. There's no, putting the genie back in the bottle of that one. So it's gone. It's there permanently, right? And because the number doesn't change forever in your entire life, it will be like that. Just have to be cautious, right? So if someone calls you claiming to know your IC number and your name and your address or whatever, means nothing, means absolutely nothing. They can pretend to be the bank or the police or whatever. Really, that information is public knowledge at that point. And it's worse when it's the reverse, right? It's worse when you call someone and want to do a legitimate transaction, say with a bank or whatever, and then the way they prove you are who you say you are is by asking you these sort of knowledge-based questions, right? What's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? Again, all that information is public knowledge. The fact that you know them doesn't really prove you are who you say you are. It just proves that you have access to some data on the internet.
I think
go on.
I think what was really scary was that when the news of the telco leak actually happened, and I saw the various types of data that was out there, which was the IC number, address, phone number, device number, right? IMEI and the IMSI. I actually asked I was in the chat room, right? It was a cybersecurity chat room. I actually asked all the people in there, if you had this information and if you were a hacker, how would you use it to, get your millions, to get your ill-gotten gains? How will you leverage it? How will you take advantage of it? I did not get very much a response to that question. And there I was thinking that, up, like if I was the hacker, I would think up some elaborate and very highly technical way to scam people of their money and things like that. But shortly after that, there was suddenly a spike in scams, right? Because when you're in WhatsApp chat rooms and with the community, if you interact very regularly with the IT community, somehow there'll be news about scams, going around. And there was a spike. Seriously, there was. And there was a time where I would tell my mom, hey, mom, be careful when you receive calls from people whom you think you trust. Like, for example, people from banks or people from the courts or people from police, and they're not who they say they are. I warned her. My mom is an elderly person. And despite this, right, the Macau scam still happened. It's not that it happened overnight or whatever. People knew about it. People knew that their information was out there, and it was even covered in the news in Malaysia. I'm not sure about Singapore, but it was really covered in the news in Malaysia that scams like this were happening. And then fast forward to today, boom, there's a name for it. It's called a Macau scam, and there was millions involved. It still happened anyway,
Yeah, it still will happen. Scams are still going to happen, right? So, I go back to Malaysia very often. Every time I go back to Malaysia in Klang, by the Kesas Highway, there's this one guy who walks around with a neck brace begging for money. And it's the same guy, like 6-8 months. Every time I go back, he's always there. He's begging, he's always getting money. But there's a different type of scam that sort of preys on people's sort of generosity and people's sort of, no one's giving their life savings to this guy, but he seems to be making a pretty decent sum of money, begging along the the traffic lights. But it's a different level of scam. But scams will always occur. They just like regularly. This is if you had to take away the sort of evilness about the whole concept of cheating people out of the entire life savings and cheating them out of retirement, basically. The scam is actually pretty well constructed, right? It's aimed at the right people. It's got the right knobs that it hits on human emotions. It gets the right amount of money, and it actually requires, as far as I understand, more infrastructure than what you can see, because how do you get money out of a bank account? It can only be transferred to another bank account. So there's actually multiple levels of victims here. Not just the person that's losing the money, but also the person that, mules the money to them eventually. And $5 millions of dollars is not small cash. Yeah.
And then here's the thing, Keith. Don't you think also there is such a waste that we made it so easy for them?
Yeah.
that all of that data
Yeah.
since 2014, literally like handed over to them. And we just made it so easy for them. There was all the data, right? They could use it, and they did.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know whether they used it or not, but it's not a
true. It's alleged.
It's very plausible. It's very plausible because it has all the information that you need to run this. And because people don't change phone numbers and don't change IP addresses, and they very rarely shift houses, etc., all of that information remains stagnant. So even though it's 6-7 years old, it's still pretty useful data to execute these sort of scams.
Yeah. So you see, yes, I have to give my information when I register for a number and so forth. But from a consumer perspective, when I do that, there is an implied contract, social contract at least, and any violation, any breach, that does not just fall solely on the consumers. But what I think is that there is a lot more that the corporates can do and they should do, and whether they are doing enough or not to protect consumers.
Yeah, so actually, it's not an implied social contract. It's actually by law within the Personal Data Protection. I have to go brush up on my legal reasons. But
well, that is in place of regulatory protection. But if let's say if we do not talk about all this, then the very act that I give you any information of mine, then to me, that's some form of trust there that you would do it. Now, of course, there are some who would, for incentives or other reasons, they would also willingly disclose their personal information. So it happens in so many ways at so many different levels. And in the case of this Macau scam and the 2017 telco leak, as you just said it yourself, it is done it's not just a random way where you target anybody based on the information that you get. To me, it is well orchestrated, and everything is pre-planned on that. So don't you think there is a link to it? That it would have actually, to a certain extent, it actually helps to push towards the success of this scam.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, these scams and these criminal organizations, they're still eventually at the core of them still business operations. And so if you increase the cost of doing business, then suddenly the profitability and the viability of the operation drops, right? So at the moment, it's just so easy, right? If you've got this massive database of everyone, and you run these calls, and you can tailor make your marketing segment, if you like, so I can target these specific prospective clients that are more likely to be scammed than these specific clients. So if I randomly call some number, somebody might respond, but I have no idea who that person is. I have no idea what IC number that person is. So it's harder to sort of convince them that I really am a police officer. Plus, I have no idea what demographic they fall in. So they might be, young and have no money and nothing to be scammed of. So that sort of random calling wouldn't work because the cost of doing the business would be too high. If instead I could target specifically people, and I could, maybe even do even further analysis, or target richer neighborhoods, or target people more likely to be susceptible to the scam, then the cost of doing business reduces because I make less calls to make more money, right? It's just, at the core of it is just a business operation. And so what we should do is basically we increase their cost of doing business. If there was some way to increase their cost of doing business, then that would actually target a scam out, right? And of course, the easiest way to do that is by basically catching them, because then the cost of business is infinity. But, what I understand is these guys are also, they're multi-million-dollar scams. Some of those millions flow back in the form of bribes. So that's a tougher way to do it. But I mean, So I think, so that's just,
Sorry, please carry on. I cut in.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So you sound as though you're onto something with because I actually saw the YouTube video of you when you gave a talk at a Hack in the Box conference in 2018. From what I understand from that video is that you haven't stopped wanting to build a breach notification service. Maybe you have already. I'm not sure. What are your plans